We're going to start out with making a base for the mug. You need a can, paper, Sharpie, and some tape. You're going to take that piece of paper and wrap it around your can. The paper will help the clay slide off of the can later. We're going to tape that into place. And then you're going to grab a Sharpie and write your name on that can. You need to grab a clay mat from the front of the room, just a canvas mat. And you're going to grab 2.5 pounds of clay from Mrs. Schoettle. And then at your table, there's a box of clay tools. There are rolling pins, 3 for you to share. And then there's these texture rolling pins. Those will help you add designs to your mug. These are texture stamps to help you stamp textures into the clay, sponges to help you smooth out the clay, wooden tools to help you cut and carve into the clay. There are paper clips that we're going to use as a tool to score when you score and add slip to attach pieces of clay together. And you will add the slip on with these little paint brushes. We're actually not going to start sculpting right away. The first thing that we need to do is wedge the clay. And the reason why we wedge the clay is to get all these air bubbles out of the clay. See, there's one right there. Actually, when I moved the clay, a crack was in it, and that's an air bubble. When you wedge, you take your palms and you push the clay down in kind of a twisting motion as well. So as you are pushing the clay down with your palms, you are twisting it around in kind of a spiral and also kind of pushing it in a diagonal direction so that you're creating a kind of cone shape. You should see a spiral at the end, and it should look kind of like an ice cream cone as you keep wedging. Before you begin sculpting at all, you need to wedge your lump of clay for at least 3 minutes and up to 5 minutes to make sure it all gets fully incorporated. See in mine how you can see like lighter areas and darker areas? That is because some of the clay on the outside was drier than the clay on the inside. So we need to make sure that's all getting mixed in together. You should start to notice that as you're wedging, your clay is kind of warming up and it's getting much easier to work with. You need to double check that it's making this cone shape and kind of coming to a point at the end. It should look like you're making an ice cream cone. Okay, I'm feeling like my clay is pretty good. So now what I want to do is turn it into a cylinder shape so we can get it rolled out into a slab. A slab is a flat piece of clay, and we need to use our rolling pins to roll it out into a flat pancake. You want it to be long enough so that your clay is larger than this cardboard template. And this template is the perfect size to wrap around that can to make our mug shape. This one right now is not ready yet, so I need to keep rolling it out, making it bigger so that it fits on that template. You also want to make sure that your clay is flat and even. You don't want any bumps in the clay, or else it'll be really hard to wrap around that can. All right, there we go. That looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that paper clip that kind of comes to a point, and I'm going to use it to draw into the clay. I'm not going to cut through the clay. I'm just going to trace the edges of that cardboard and just get that general shape in there. Now we're going to use the wooden tools to actually cut it out. So you should have something that looks like a little wooden knife in your bin. So these extra pieces, we're not going to get rid of those. We want to save those because we're going to use those to create the base for the mug and the handle. So you're going to put those back in your plastic baggie to save for tomorrow. Now you definitely want to put those back in your plastic bag right away so that they don't dry out. So now we have all these texture tools that we can choose from. I really like this roller over here, so I'm going to use that first. I'm not going to wrap my piece of clay around my can yet. First, I'm going to add some texture to it. When you're using these rollers, you want to use quite a bit of pressure because they are just rubber, so the more pressure you add, the more that's going to stamp in the design. Okay, now we are ready to grab that can and wrap our clay around it. You want to be really careful not to mess up any texture stamps that you added to it. And you want to make sure you're lining up the clay with the bottom of the can. You should see some of the paper sticking out of the top. Kind of gently wrap it around. And then we're going to make sure that we add slip and score the edges before we stick them together. Scoring means scratching, and we're going to use that paper clip to scratch up the edges that we're going to attach together. Any piece of clay that you add onto another piece of clay needs to be scored really, really well. You're scratching into that surface of the clay. So I'm scoring on both sides, and you score so that your slip has a little bit extra grip. Slip is just watered down clay, but it acts as glue. So I'm going to paint slip, the watered down clay, I'm going to paint slip into all those scratches that I scored on the edges of my clay here. Now I can attach those two pieces and squish them together so that they are permanently stuck. And it is really important that you smooth out those edges so that you don't get any cracks. It would really stink to get cracks in your mug, and then you have a mug that doesn't work because it doesn't hold liquid. You can also use the sponge tool as well to smooth that out. You should smooth it in a way to where you cannot see the seam anymore. It should look cohesive. It should look like there was never even an attachment point. So this is all that we're going to do for day 1. We are going to put this back in our baggie, and then we'll come back tomorrow to add the base and the handle. So you'll grab your bag. Be careful not to smush your mug up against that extra clay, but you do want to keep that extra clay in your bag overnight so that it stays workable for tomorrow. Put that in your bag, try to zip the top, and then we'll put it on the shelf for tomorrow. Ceramics hand building mugs, day 2. We're going to take that mug out of the bag and that extra clay. First thing we want to do is take the can out of your cylinder of clay that we made yesterday. Luckily, we wrapped that piece of paper around it. It makes it a lot easier. If you just push the can from the bottom, I found that to be the easiest way to do that, and just kind of try to slide the can out. Remove the paper, and it should be a nice, smooth cylinder of clay that you made. You're going to throw the paper away, and please put the can back up front where you got it so I can reuse it next year. We're going to smooth out the inside seam really quick. And before you begin sculpting, it's a really good idea to wedge out the clay, just in case it got a little bit unevenly dry. All right, we're going to roll it into a ball, and then we're going to squish it down to make another slab. Remember that a slab is a flat piece of clay. It's kind of like a pancake, so we're going to use the rolling pin to roll it out. You want that slab big enough so that the walls of your mug fits on top of it. We're going to use our paper clip tool to trace around the outside of our mug. I'm not carving into it yet. I'm just using that point to trace the circle around. Now I'm going to use that wooden knife tool again to cut out that circle. Now don't get rid of this excess clay. We need it for the handle. So I'm just going to set that to the side and we'll come back to it later. Remember, every single time you attach two pieces of clay together, you need to score and add slip. So I'm going to really scratch into the edges of this circle because that's where it's going to attach to the cylinder. I'm going to scratch it up. It doesn't really matter which direction you score in, just all different directions so that you're making a good grip for the slip. I'm going to score both pieces, the slab and the cylinder. I'm going to make sure I score really, really well so that it gets a really good attachment point. Then I'm going to take my slip. Remember, slip is like glue. You definitely want to use a lot of slip here so that these pieces become together as one. As the slip starts to dry, it turns into one solid piece of clay. So now I'm going to take my slab circle and squish it onto the cylinder. Now you want to make sure you really press it down so that it makes a good attachment. This part is really important. It's really important that you smooth out those edges and make a seamless attachment. You absolutely do not want any holes in this part because then your mug will not work. If you have any cracks in your attachment, then your mug will not hold liquid. So you need to make sure that you are really careful here and really mindful that you squish down all those attachments and make a seamless seam. You can use that sponge to smooth it out. You can even take your paintbrush and paint slip on the inside of the mug as well if you want to paint on the inside crease. So what we're going to do now is make the handle. We're going to make the handle by rolling out a coil. A coil is like a rope of clay. You can make this handle in any kind of design that you want. I've seen people take 3 thin coils and braid them together. I've seen some students take their coil and twist it so that it's like a twisty handle. You can make it however shape and design that you want or shape and design that feels comfortable to you. Here's a good tip. Add that handle to where you attach the 2 ends of the cylinder together, where your pattern kind of stops. Now remember, every single piece of clay that you attach together needs to be scored and add slip. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to make sure that where I want to attach my handle, I grab that paper clip tool and I scratch and score really well into the clay. Both pieces. Take my slip, I will paint slip into where I scored and squish it on there. Later, I am going to make sure that I smooth out the seams, the attachment points. I'm going to make sure that I slip and score the bottom of the handle where I'm going to attach it as well. Don't worry if you score in too large of an area, you can always smooth that out later. Now I'm going to take my brush and smooth out any areas where I can kind of still see some scoring marks or some edges that just need to be smoothed down. Also, make sure you go around the lip of your mug to make sure it's nice and comfy when you drink out of it. You don't want to have any sharp edges. Now I'm going back in to those designs that we rolled into it and just kind of carving them out to make them more noticeable. The walls of the mug are kind of thick, so you can carve into it and carve in different shapes, patterns, and designs or words. I just used the same pattern that we rolled out and kind of made some of the lines and designs more noticeable. Once I got it to where I wanted it, I didn't want any sharp edges, so I ended up taking my sponge and smoothing out all the edges. Before you can call your mug done, you need to take your paper clip tool and carve your name into the bottom of the mug. Then we can set it on the shelf to dry so it can go in the kiln.